Hi everybody, I am Lian Duan. Today I'm going to introduce to you a few classroom management skills. When it comes to language immersion content learning, it is very important that you establish clear routines with the students to make sure that you can follow your learning schedule. A good class always starts with a warm-up, then the students are introduced to the learning goals. In the end, you must review the goals with the students so that they can gauge their learning result against the goals. As students coming into the classroom, you need to find something for them to do so they can immediately be engaged in learning. One of the things that we normally do in a middle school is to start the students on POD. Every day you will write one prompt or a topic on the board for them to do. An example would be, please draw a timeline for Boston Tea Party. So the students, as they come into the classroom, they can start writing or talking about this topic. Because we are going to have about 16 students in a language immersion environment, I would make the suggestion that you have a learning station for them. You can break students into multi-groups. So during the 5 days of our learning, you can talk to one group every day, so that by the end of the 5th day, you can get to every single student during this time. While you work with one group of students, the other students can work on the topic. This way, you can interact with the students more in depth. Now we're going to talk about transitions. Since we're a language immersion content learning summer camp, it is very important that you design your class to be very interactive, which means the students are given multiple opportunities to move their bodies, to talk to their peers, and you need to utilize the space in the classroom wisely. Because we are going to have many activities in the class, it's very important to handle the transitions well, because the transitions can be really messy while students struggle to find out what are the steps, when to start, when to stop. Here are some tips for you to schedule your transitions better. To start an activity, it's very important that you explain the activities well with your students. The first thing you need to do is to make sure that you have a written steps on the board. For example, if you want to conduct a think, pair, share, square activity, it's very important that you have all 3 steps written on the board. Then you can explain while pointing at these steps. First, think on your own. Write down your thoughts. You have 2 minutes. Use your body to help the students understand what you mean. 2, share your thoughts with your partners. 3 minutes. 3, pair with another 2 students. Share your thoughts and then add to your answers. 5 minutes. After you explain using the visual cue, you are going to ask the students to help you out to model in front of the whole class. Then afterwards, if the activity involves multi-steps, it's best to pick a few students to ask them, what do you need to do during this activity to make sure that they understand the steps. During transitions, it's important that you get your students familiar with a few signals. You need a signal to ask the students to repeat after you without actually saying the words repeat after me, because it's time consuming. While I was teaching a 2nd grade language immersion program for math, I ask the students, whenever I do this, they will repeat after me. You can find a body gesture that you're comfortable with as long as you train your students to be familiar with this hand gesture. When I taught the 2nd grade, they were familiar with this. After 4 years, when I taught them again in 6th grade, they still remember this. So it's really easy for me to just do this whenever I want them to repeat after me. Because we are a language immersion classroom, you're going to do this a lot. So find something that you're comfortable with. Another signal that you need is how to call for attention during the middle of a activity. What I normally do is to use a chime, but sometimes when you don't have a chime, you can train the students to use you as a human chime. For example, I would say chime, then I will say 1, 2, 3. Then the students know they need to stop what they're doing, put the pencils down, and eyes on me. You can also use clapping or whatever rhythm you find useful. The best part about clapping is that in order to clapping back to you, the students need to put their pencils down so that naturally you stop what they're doing. As the activity is coming to an end, you need to give students sufficient warnings that they need to wrap it up. Normally, for a complicated activity, you will give them about 5 minutes to wrap up. For example, a writing assignment would be a complicated activity. Or if it is a think, pair, share, square, you can give them 2 minutes warning. You can say, we have 2 minutes left. Please wrap it up and finish your last sentences. And then when it's come down to 1 minute, give them another reminder, you have about 1 minute left. It does not have to be accurate. I find out that the students rarely look at the clock and see if it's really 1 minute left. But the whole point is to give them a signal that they need to wrap up pretty quickly. And then when you want them to stop, you're going to say chime again, give them a signal to call for their attention, and then count down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Put your pencils down and eyes on me. I normally give them 5 seconds to respond because students find it easier to wrap up the final thoughts. During the learning activity, sometimes you will encounter students who are reluctant to participate. Here are some tips to engage the students in the language immersion content learning activities. During the activities, it's very important to give lots of positive reinforcement. You can sometimes even give them in Chinese and just say, 你做得很棒，我很喜欢你，这样很有勇气。用英文来跟我说，虽然你也许觉得你的英文不够好，但是说出来是非常重要的。So that the other students can hear you, and instead of reminding them you need to talk, put on the emphasis on the positive behavior would be more efficient. Also, sometimes when you ask a question, so for example, if you ask, why did the British send soldiers to Boston? Sometimes you will find nobody is willing to raise their hand and answer that question. It is very common because nobody wants to be put on the spot. One way that I find most effective is ask them to turn and talk. This is another skill that you need to practice with your students. Normally, if you give them time to talk among each other, it will encourage them to talk and answer the questions. So what you would do is that you ask a question and you wait for about 20 seconds. If nobody responds, then you're going to say, please turn and talk to your friends. And as they talk, you try to walk around and listen to them, and then you're going to stop them and you're going to pick a student to talk. Sometimes when you pick on the students and they just couldn't say anything, it's okay. So you're going to tell them, I'm going to skip you right now. Do you need 2 minutes? I'll come back to you. And then you can go to other students who are willing to share their thoughts, and then you can approach them and say, in a quiet voice, and say, are you ready? Are you ready to share your thoughts? So sometimes it's okay to pass them once or twice, and then if they're still reluctant, then you want to approach them at another time and just to say, this is a language immersion classroom. It's really important that you speak up, and so you get more opportunity to practice with me. So we want the students to be engaged and be able to talk and discuss and listen all the time. However, we also don't want them to feel awkward or embarrassed in front of their peers. Sometimes during an activity, students might be off task, they might be talking to each other on unrelated topics. Instead of calling them out and disciplining them in front of the classroom, you want to do it in a less interruptive way so they're not embarrassed. Also, you can run your class more smoothly. One way to do this is just to walk up to them. Using the closeness of the body normally stop them from continuing to talk. So you want to approach them. If that didn't stop them, you can put your hands on their shoulder gently. Sometimes what I would do is also let them know that a red sticky notes or just a piece of regular sticky notes and put a T on it, or put any signal that you think might help the students understand what kind of behavior is inappropriate and they need to stop right now. As teachers, it's very important to keep track of how well the students are doing. We call them assessments. In the language immersion classroom, we can gauge the students' learning process using the following tools. First, you can use informal assessment. POD can be designed as one of the informal assessment. You can give a topic and ask them to review what have been taught in the previous day. Or you can give them a list of the words and ask them to explain or act it out to show their understandings. Sometimes you can also use writing samples as well. There are multiple writing assignments designed in the PPT that you can use to collect writing samples from the students. There is also another activity called Write Around that you can do during the POD time so that you can see how well the students are doing. Are they actively using the sentence frames and the sentence structures that you've used with them in the previous classes? But what I consider the most important and powerful tool is called observation notes. During the class, you have to have a list of the students' names with space after their names to record your observations. As you walk around during activities, you have to write down a few words to gauge their performance. As you are doing your observation, I suggest that you record the students' performance from 3 different angles: speaking, listening, and reading. You can judge their writing better with their writing samples, but you have to pay attention during the activities to gauge their ability to speak, to listen and understand, and read. Sometimes we might think that it's easy to keep everything in our head, but as a veteran teacher who's been doing this for the past 7 years, I don't think it's very possible. I do the observation notes a lot with my students, and I find it very helpful when it comes to writing report for the students later on. Teaching a language immersion content class is not very easy. However, as long as you design your class to be interactive and provide adequate visual and audio support for your students, and then have a lot of interactions with your students, you're going to be fine. One of the things that you can draw on is your past experience with your Chinese teachers. How did they teach you so well? What are the activities that you really liked and enjoyed? What do you find most useful from their classes? These are the things that you can draw on.